Hi, Cristie. How are you doing?
Rebecca, I am doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you. I think for me, it's Saturday morning, and for you, it's Saturday evening. So I'm very glad we could, yeah, afternoon. Okay. So I'm
Yeah.
very glad we could work out our schedules, even though we live on different continents.
I'm so happy to see you again. And I'm really, really happy to invite you onto my channel this time because we did a previous interview, didn't we, on your channel? It was a complete riot. It was so much fun.
Oh, that is great. And I can tell you, I invited you because of, you talk about your journey with MS and the carnivore diet. And I have a very close friend of mine who's also a teacher and has been struggling with MS since I've known her, which is, well, as long as I've been a teacher, so over 20 years. And she's gradually like coming around, I think. And she's like, I've been heading more and more towards carnivore. And it's interviews like yours that I did with you that are helping her see like there may be alternatives out there that could help.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. That really means something to me. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Well, you're on the hot seat today.
I love being in the hot seat. That's what I do every day as a teacher.
So should we start? If you'd like to tell everybody, because Cristie does have a carnivore channel, really excellent, full of vitality, lots of tips, lots of interviews, carnivore channel called Meeting Wellness, as you can see here. And I highly encourage everybody, first of all, to subscribe. So as a wonderful advocate for the carnivore community, if you could just tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to carnivore and the kind of experience that you've had on carnivore.
Yeah, sure. So I like to think of myself, or when I do these interviews, I say I'm kind of like an accidental carnivore, which is, I think, a lot different than some people. Some people, come into this way of eating because they have such health challenges, and maybe it's autoimmune or whatever it is. But I struggled my whole life with yo-yo dieting. I never allowed my weight to get very far out of control, though, because I really wanted to fit in that smaller size. But I would go through these phases starting in my teenage years of binging and restricting. And that cycle just went for until I was, 2 years ago. So 47. So that's a good long, over 30 years of time where I would restrict because, I was very into calorie counting to the point that it got to be an obsession to calorie count and just restricting that down until, the weight would have no choice but to come off. But I was hungry and miserable, and with every passing year, more unhealthy. And 2 years ago, it was actually February of 2023. It was like the same. Well, that whole time it was the same, like 10 to 20 pounds that would, go on and off and on and off. But in February of 2023, that, the weight had started to creep back up. And I thought, well, I haven't, although I've tried low carb and I've tried, a version of Atkins, I've never tried keto. And I've heard of keto, but I've never tried keto. Didn't even know what keto was, except, you eat a lot of bacon and avocados. It was like just kind of what I heard through the grapevine. Hadn't researched it or anything like that, but just thought, well, maybe this is a way that I can lose this weight. And, I had only ever thought about food as, calories, not as a source of nutrition or anything like that. It was just, is this number of calories gonna make me gain weight or not? And so that's kind of, it was like the same old mindset, right? Going into that time, I had no idea that at the end of that, 2-year period up to present day that I would like start this YouTube channel and be eating only meat. I had no idea. It was just keto's a thing that people do to lose weight. I want to lose some weight. Let me try. So, as many of you know, I'm a teacher and I've taught public school for 25 years. And in 2020, they sent us all home to learn online because of the world events that were happening at that time, with basically no support and no instructions from our school district. Just here's your Chromebook and go teach kids online because we can't be in the building. And so that wasn't easy, even though I tend to use technology, in my teaching. It's still, that was a whole other level. And so I learned about all that to say during that time is when I got more involved on social media. So because I'm 49, I didn't grow up with social media. And it never really became a part of my life at all until this time happened, and I was like, well, where am I gonna find teaching materials and things to use with my students? And teachers were so wonderful, and they were sharing these things basically for free and just putting them out there for other teachers, who needed them. And so I discovered Facebook groups, which I know sounds silly that I just discovered that 2 years ago. I really could have cared less about Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, social media of any kind. It just wasn't a thing I did until I had that need, right? Which I think is good. Yeah. And I had that need, right? Like, I need this stuff. I want to keep my students engaged, try to get them to, attend school and keep learning even in this circumstance. And that's how I discovered Facebook groups, which is important to my eating journey, because as soon as I started keto, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to need some recipes. Now I know about Facebook groups. Maybe there's a Facebook group for that. And of course, sure enough, yes, there's tons of them. I basically just searched it and joined the first one that came up. And it was, I was kind of looking through there, and people would post recipes, and then, you kind of get sucked into the comments, right? And so there was some comment in there very quickly on, within a week or two of me even starting the keto diet, that said, it wasn't directed toward me, but it just said something about watch Dr. Barry. And I was like, if you don't know who Dr. Ken Berry is, go over there as soon as you're done watching this interview and go check his channel out. But I can't think of many people in our space who don't know who Dr. Berry is, because his channel is very large, and he is a physician that definitely recommends a keto or ketovore or carnivore diet. So I was like, well, who the heck is this Dr. Berry guy? And I hit the link for whatever video that they were, recommending, and came upon his channel. And, it's a very large channel. So I zeroed in on his keto playlist, again, not knowing anything about carnivore, but I went for a couple of months, just anytime I was not busy, just binge watching, like just down that keto playlist. And so I learned very quickly about, don't go out and buy the keto products, eat a meat-based keto, right? So it was like very quickly, I was doing whole food, meat-based keto with the occasional broccoli, that kind of thing, the occasional zucchini, lots of ribeyes, mostly meat with the occasional veg, and some dairy in there. And sure enough, within a couple months of starting that, the 20 pounds came off, and it came off, very easily. I'll also stop to comment here that my mom saw me do that, and she's currently 72 years old, and she started also a meat-based keto diet, not watching Dr. Berry, but just listening to me, and the things I was learning and kind of passing that on to her. So if you want to ask about that later, because she's still 2 years later eating that way, and doing at 72. So yeah, a couple months after that, the 20 pounds came off, but I found myself just, I don't know if it was laziness, preference, a mixture of both, but the vegetables, I was just kind of like, I don't feel like cooking that. I don't necessarily feel like eating it, and I don't feel like cooking it. So I'm just going to make the meat and eat that. And I don't have a carniversary, a lot of us call it, because I don't know. There wasn't a decision point where I was like, oh, I'm going to eat carnivore. I didn't even know it was a thing until after I had been eating only meat for a couple of weeks. And I was like, I wonder if this is okay. Like, is it okay? Because I was eating vegetables. Yeah. It was just what I preferred. So going back to Dr. Berry, I was like, oh, he has all this carnivore content. I had just been on his keto playlist and not going anywhere else. Just like, oh, but look, he's now carnivore. Like, that's the keto stuff is a little older. Now he's carnivore, and he has all this carnivore stuff. And then I learned, well, it is okay. And I know I've been talking a lot, but just to wrap up this question for you, what happened was within a month, I would say, of just eating only meat, my mental health, which I wouldn't have told you or thought was struggling at all, took a major turn for the better. It completely shocked me. And that is why I decided to stay carnivore and continue to be carnivore for basically 2 years now, because it's now, March of 2025 as of the time of this interview.
That's fascinating that you literally were guided to it by your body, that your body, the instincts of your body. And it's actually something I was quite interested to ask you, because I was aware that you'd started keto and gone into carnivore because of the videos on your channel. And I wanted to ask you, because I get the impression you're a little bit more nutritionally informed than I am. I've just had an experience, and I've had, and I've been telling my personal story, but I wouldn't say that I've made a huge effort to inform myself about the nutritional science behind the diet. But I really get the impression that you are quite a lot more in the know about that kind of thing. So what I'd like to ask you is, could you, and the reason I want to ask is because I sometimes get tempted to move into keto. And I'm not sure whether or not I should. And I would like to understand a bit more about the nutritional science behind what's better for you, carnivore than keto. What's the nutritional science behind that? Do you know?
So I'm going to start this answer by saying that I am not a doctor. I have no degree or anything like that. And I'm not a nutritionist. I'm an elementary school math and science teacher. And anything that I have learned on this topic is from watching YouTube. But it comes from experts like that I already mentioned, like Dr. Barry, also Dr. Anthony Chafee, Professor Bart Kay, people that are informed in this area. And so I would say that if you are first starting out and if you're metabolically healthy and you don't have any issues, like my mom actually at 70 when she started was on no medication. Like what 70-year-old do you know, right? But she had a few things like some arthritis that was starting up, right? And wanting to lose a little weight, but no overwhelm, no diabetes, none of that stuff. And so she went meat-based keto and continues there. But notice that if she'll send me pictures of her food, right? And I'm looking at that plate and I'm thinking, oh, there's like more and more veggies on the plate. And then the next thing you know, she's complaining about her hands hurt. And so I'm like, have you looked at your plates lately? Because I'm seeing a higher vegetable content and, in there, maybe consider upping that meat content, upping that fat content. And sure enough, that inflammation in her hands, gets to be under control. I would also say that for, the plants that we have to eat are heavily modified by humans. So they are not natural occurring plants. They are not the plants that our ancestors were eating, which were mostly eaten for a couple of reasons. One, it was a starvation food, basically. If they couldn't get a kill, if the hunt failed, they would eat these very fibrous roots. They weren't anything like the tubers and things like we have today that are full of starches and sugars and things. Not easy to digest, but just to keep them from starving. Or in the fall, whatever fruit would become ripe was there, and they would gather that up, or they would brave, fighting off bees to take a little bit of that honey to maybe fatten up for the winter. And for most of our human history, that was kind of the use, I guess, that we had for plants. And now we're sort of eating like it's fall, that 2-week period in fall. We kind of eat like that all year because that stuff is available. And the plants have been highly modified, sprayed with a lot of pesticides and things of that nature that don't wash off. And so we're just ingesting high amounts of things like fructose. All plants have carbohydrates, and the lower limit of necessary carbohydrate in the human diet is 0. We don't need 1 gram of carbohydrate ever. We don't need it. It doesn't mean we can't eat it. It doesn't mean we can't process it, but we absolutely don't need it. All the nutrients that we need are in fatty, the muscle meat of, fatty animals, preferably ruminant animals, but, any animal will do. My son, if you want to talk about this a little more later too, he's been carnivore for a year and he is 16. And he eats a lot of beef, but he also eats like chicken thighs with the skin on, cooked in beef tallow. So he, chicken and beef are his go-tos. And I'm not like, no, you have to eat ruminants only, right? If he wants to throw some chicken in there, that's what he's got in the fridge right now. That, he'll be enjoying that for dinner tonight. So I hope that answered your question. But for me, when the plants just accidentally fell off my plate, all of a sudden I had no more social anxiety. And I wouldn't have told you that I had social anxiety. I thought I was fine. I thought, oh, I'm just an introvert, which I do think I'm an introvert. but there's a difference between being afraid to go out in public, anxious to go to family gatherings, and being introverted, right? And all of that fear and anxiety around being around people just disappeared. And that was the first bit that I noticed.
You get normalized into something which you then come to realize was actually a condition or something that was holding you back that was so normal. And then going carnivore makes you realize what the condition you used to have that was so normal you didn't know you have it. That's amazing. And what does that say about a lot of the way we live today and what we're normalized into because of the diet that we're naturally encouraged to follow?
So to your question about keto versus carnivore, for me, the whole time I was keto, I was still experiencing that social anxiety. So even though the amount of plant material was drastically reduced, I still had the social anxiety the whole time I was keto. I was able to lose weight, but I still, I guess I'll say, suffered from that, even though it was unbeknownst to me because it had kind of crept up over the years, and I just didn't realize it. It was when I removed the rest of the plants. And now I'm, if I eat a plant, it's like a pickle once a month. I mean, it's very, very minimal, and I don't have my social anxiety is, I don't know, almost zero.
So do you feel that in the future you may be able to reintroduce plants? Would you want to do that? Or are you happy to just be strict carnivore?
Yeah. So for me right now, I'm not going to say that I'll never do it. Occasionally I'll eat a pickle or an avocado now. Those are really the only two that I'll ever do. And it's very occasionally. Sometimes I'll even buy the avocado thinking I'm going to eat it and then it rots and I throw it away because I don't want it. So to answer your question, at least currently after basically 2 years, I don't have any desire to eat plants. I don't miss them. I'm not I don't feel like I'm restricting myself and I can't eat that plant. I just don't eat it. And I'm not forcing myself to not eat it. I legitimately don't want to eat it. I have picanha set for later and I'm happy to eat that. I don't want to have anything with it.
That's the key word, picanha.
I know, right? I'm the picanha queen around here, the picanha president. I don't know. I have many titles in regards to picanha.
In our last interview, we talked about picanha, which I had never heard of. And then I said, what's picanha? And you said, you haven't heard of picanha. And then there was a picanha banner that you put up. Hilarious. I have to admit, I still haven't tried it. I still haven't tried picanha, but I certainly will. I certainly will.
Yeah, I hope you do. It's delicious.
So I feel like you're very in touch with your body. And is that since you went carnivore, or would you say, has it put you more in with your body?
Depends on in what context, right? So I've had a few medical issues, although very few, nothing like the metabolic health stuff that we're always talking about in this space. Although to be fair, I was never tested until I went carnivore and asked my doctor to take a fasting insulin and an A1C. But my weight never got out of control. I know for sure that I had blood sugar spikes and dips because I would feel like, oh, I have to eat. I would get that hangry thing. But as far as diagnosed, never. But I have had a couple of, maybe not related to diet. Well, maybe if I'd eaten carnivore my whole life, my musculature and internal fascia might have been stronger. But I had a couple hernias after having kids that I had some surgeries for. And I knew it was a hernia. I knew it. It was small, though, and not super obvious. It was like a little bump on my tummy, a little bit above my belly button. And this was way before I went carnivore. We're talking 12 years ago or so. And I went to my doctor and I was like, I got a hernia right there, because in our medical system, if you have insurance or the type of insurance that I have, you have to go see a general practitioner, right? And then they'll refer you to a specialist. So I go to my general practitioner doctor. I tell her I have a hernia, but I also tell her that it hurts. And she tells me, well, hernias aren't painful, so it's not a hernia. You probably just have, you just need some antacids. It's probably just that you have too much, stomach acid and it's some heartburn. And I'm like, but I think it's a hernia though. And she was like, well, try the antacids and then come back. And I was like, long story short, it was a hernia. After they looked at it with a CT scan. That was inconclusive because it was so small. So I had to go through that CT scan and all of that injected stuff they put in there. With it didn't tell them that it was a hernia. It told them that it was something, and then so when I went into surgery, it was technically exploratory surgery, and oh my gosh, it was a hernia. So all of that to say, so in that regard, yes, I knew exactly what it was. I'm like, this is a hernia, but they made me jump through all these extraneous hoops that turned out to, sure enough, be unnecessary because I knew very well what was going on. When it came to my mental health, though, I had social anxiety very badly and didn't even realize it. And I think part of it was just gradual. It gradually happened. I was much more like, when I was in high school, I played sports. I did, volleyball. I did basketball. A little younger, I did basketball. And then I did cheerleading and dance team. With no problem doing any of that and being with my friends on the bus to and from, sports events. And I wanted to go to all the school dances, and I did. And all that kind of stuff, to just gradually being like, I didn't want to come out of my room. But it was very gradual, right? And I was still teaching. Like, I've been teaching this whole time. So I could like suck it up, turn the switch on, drive myself to work, do a day of teaching, and then like, okay, nobody talk to me. I'm closed. I'm done, and just go back into my little cocoon and then do it again the next day. And that's what my life had become. And I had no idea that that was dysfunctional. It just seemed normal to me. So in that case, I would say no, not so much with the self-awareness.
I mean, do you think that that was energy depletion from teaching? And then, because the difference being the diet, the energy that you're gaining from the fat, is it purely that, or is there more to it, do you think, in terms of mental health?
So teaching is a very draining profession. And for those of you that don't know, teachers make more decisions every day than brain surgeons. So a lot of us suffer from things like decision fatigue. I have, in where I live here in California, our class sizes are very high. So I have had up to 34 kids in the room with no aide. No, there's nobody else in there. It's me and I teach 5th grade. So they're 10 and 11. So 34 11-year-olds in the room with me, and that's it. And so, I mean, I love it, but it's, and currently I don't have that many. I have 30, but 30 is kind of the norm. And like I said, the most I've had is 34 at a time. But anyway, so it is very draining. And then there's a lot of, I don't know, things that have happened where a lot of people are unhappy with just teachers in general, like not me specifically, but they kind of take that out on us. And then there's pressure from, not only those parents, but from the district office and the administrative side of things. So we're like kind of crunched like this while having to, do all these things for our students. And so it is a very exhausting profession. And even on Carnivore, it's much better. I have energy to get through the day, and I come home and, if you look at my YouTube channel, it's been active for, I guess, about 1.5 years now. And I have, I don't know, like around 600 videos on there. So I make a lot of videos, but I would never have had the energy to do that before, because when am I doing that? A lot of times I'm doing that after I've taught for a full day. So I'm not coming home and just like, I do sometimes come home and sit on the couch, but not every day am I doing that. I still have energy to go for a walk or make content for my channel or hang with my kids or do something with them. I have one still in high school. So like he's in the school band. So like go to his football game when he's playing for that or whatever. I do have more energy. But as far as the social so part of it, I think for sure was that, but I know for a fact by reading, you said I was nutritionally informed. So here we go. Dr. Georgia Ede wrote a fabulous book that honestly, I watched a lot of her content, but after my son went carnivore, I read her book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. And then Dr. Chris Palmer, very similarly, Brain Energy. And if you are suffering from any either autoimmune or mental health disorder of any kind, it's the high fat. It is the high fat diet that is going to help with that. So I think it was a combination of, when I went carnivore, I did say, my social anxiety improved, but I had a lot of other improvements. And one of those was in the area of just straight up energy and better sleep. But also that high fat is so good for your brain. So it was like, all of a sudden I was like, oh, like my brain went to another level. I can think more clearly. I don't feel brain fog anymore. I don't like stumble over my words. You didn't prepare me ahead of time with what you were going to ask me. And I don't feel uncomfortable. I didn't expect you to. I didn't want you to, but I don't feel comfortable answering questions like this on the fly, knowing that it's going to be put on the internet later. Ease. you know, with whatever my brain's going to come up with whatever question you're going to ask me. So
Yeah.
I do think a combination of both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, the brain is the ultimate interface between body and mind, isn't it? Like, it's the ultimate. I certainly found that my brain came back, and it was that with my energy levels was the first thing I noticed on Carnivore. And as somebody with MS, that was quite a huge, significant change. You know, that was from not really functioning to suddenly killing it, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I'm on the go all the time now. And sure, I get tired, maybe more tired than I would have done before I got sick, but maybe that's because I'm 10 years older than when I first got sick. So it's nothing that's out of the realms of normal, of what I might consider normal. And I'm constantly amazed by how I can pack my days full of things and take that for granted, where I could not do that 3 years ago. You know, it's amazing. And it is, I do think also that it from my experience, I have felt that to be the energy coming from fat being your energy source rather than sugars, carbohydrates, insulin, all of that. But as I say, I've just experienced that. So it's interesting to hear you echo that experience. And I wanted to ask you about ADHD, because I know from your channel that your son has ADHD. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you so much about that, both from a teacher perspective, because I've been on the front lines of watching, like I've seen, you know, posts and things about the incidence of ADHD rising in our children. And I've been on the front lines of that, like literally watching it happen. So, you know, because I've been teaching for 25 years. So I started teaching in the year 2000. And I've taught 4th and 5th grade. So anywhere from 9 to 11 years old. And I have just watched the incidence of that go up and up and up. And I think it's multifactorial. I do think part of it is, you know, a lot of it's to do with diet, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I do think part of it is the rise in the screens, the onset of the cell phones. They just have that technology at their fingertips, and it's that dopamine addiction. They're addicted to dopamine because they get that dopamine hit from doing that, and they're just on their screens all day. And then as a teacher, I have to compete with that. So like me standing up there with a lesson, that's not engaging for them. And so it's just become this almost like a losing battle, as that, you know, the screens have kind of taken over. So I think that is a big factor, and there's probably other ones, but to talk about diet, I think with my son, now in hindsight, diet was a huge factor, and I never thought that diet was a factor. So I remember teaching before I had kids, and I remember parents, you'd hear them kind of talking, and I heard parents talking about, oh, that red dye, like if your kid has you know, attention issues, take this red dye. I don't even remember the number. And I just, in my brain, like I've never said it to them, but in my brain at that point in my life thinking, that's crazy. Like, it's just your parenting. You have bad parenting. And that's why your kids like that. Like, those are the thoughts I had.
Like a food dye, a coloring.
In our food. Yes. And other countries don't often, they don't have as many additives as we have here in the US. But yes, they were talking about a specific red food coloring. It's absolutely linked with attention issues, but at the time, without any research, right, just on my gut, my intuition, I just thought, and I didn't have any children of my own, and I really had no. So again, I didn't speak to it, but it is hard for me to admit that I thought that, because boy, was I wrong, and that was very judgmental, and I should have researched it, but I didn't, because I wasn't the mom, and I didn't have any kids of my own to feed. And it wasn't up to me to feed them. It was up to me to teach them at that point. But yeah, boy, was I wrong. But I do remember some parents believing that, and me just thinking that was nuts, and it was just parenting skills, you know, that they needed, and that those kids needed. Totally wrong. Because then fast forward to I've had 2 children actually, and they both have ADHD, but I often talk about my younger one because he's the one who's been willing to change his diet.
Right.
And so with him, we noticed some symptoms as early as, 2 and 3 years old. At that time, we didn't think necessarily that it was ADHD, and he's a boy, right? So he had a lot of energy, which boys do, and boys should be running around in the fresh air. But he also had a lot of anger, and a lot of, like, you couldn't get him to change what he was doing to go brush his teeth or go put on his pajamas, or, whatever it was, just like the daily life activities, that was near impossible to get him to do. And especially when he started preschool, he would experience where he'd be going through his day and then he would have this meltdown. So bad that they couldn't even get him to leave the room. Like they would have to pick him up and carry him out of the room because he was on the floor screaming and whatever, around the other children. And they would have to carry him out of there and take him to the office and let him calm down. And that would happen almost every day. Because by that point of the day, his brain was so overstimulated, he just didn't know what else to do. And then the littlest input would just send him right over the edge. So that was like building and building throughout the day. And then boom, and he would just lose his mind. And so one of the other parents at the time was an occupational therapist, and her daughter was in his class. And so I hired her outside, and she worked with children as well. So she was an occupational therapist. She worked like as an independent contractor, but like for school districts. So she was very familiar with this type of thing and children. And so, yeah, she did a whole battery of tests, again, paid for by me out of pocket. But because, our medical system isn't going to pay for any of that stuff or acknowledge that that's could be a problem. But she diagnosed him with a few things, but one of the main ones was the sensory integration processing disorder. And it was with all 5 senses, meaning that the input that his 5 senses were bringing in is like way more stimulating to his brain than most people. And some people that have this just have it in the eye, like visual input, but all the other 4 senses are fine. He has it in all 5 senses, right? So you're in a room with a bunch of 3-year-olds and, a preschool environment. And it was like all the sensory overloading was just overwhelming and he didn't know what to do with it. So at first it wasn't ADHD, but we tried occupational therapy was the first thing. And so she worked with him and again, all paid for out of pocket because he was at a private preschool. None of this stuff is offered through school. And so we paid and for it and she was great, but I didn't see improvement really much at all. I think some of that, and at that time, I don't know how he's very anti, like he doesn't want to do what the adults are saying. But at that time, I don't know if I knew that or if he was exhibiting that, but it didn't take very much long after that to realize that if the adult tells them, look, you need to do this because of this problem, he's not going to do it. He's just going to fight you. And so that was the first thing we tried. And then it was like, didn't really help. And then we went to, he went into kindergarten. I brought him to school with me. We're still seeing this stuff happening. And after a few years of that, we got him, I think in first grade, we got him into, this is when we got him his first IEP. And that's individualized education plan. It's a thing that public schools can do for children who are diagnosed either with a learning disability, a specific learning disability, or an other health impairment. So we got him in under a speech disability, not that he couldn't say his letters, but there's another part of speech called pragmatic language, and it's how you interact with other people. So, not to monopolize the conversation, like to understand body cues, that kind of thing. And so we got him into that special education under that umbrella, which then it didn't really help the problem. And so then that started expanding out with more and more services being added, including in-school occupational therapy. And then later when he got his ADHD diagnosis and as he got older in 3rd grade and his academic performance, because he's very smart and his IQ was tested at well above normal. But he started not doing well in school as it became more like the traditional academics as we know it, where you're like writing a paragraph and all this stuff. And he did not want to write and did not want to produce any work. He didn't want to produce, like he knew it all up here, but he didn't want to produce the assignment. And so he's failing, even though he's very intelligent. Yeah. So then he was given academic services. And then during this time, we brought in the counselor. So the school counselor came in, taught him emotional regulation strategies, which he wanted nothing to do with. When I tried or the teacher tried to get him to use those, he just got more angry. So because of that, I did counseling outside of school. So he was in counseling for over a year, every single week. We brought back the occupational therapy, this time through his medical doctor so that I wouldn't have to, we just paid the copay. this was at a different place that was geared for occupational therapy for children. I mean, I could go on. I know this is exhausting. Some people, I've gotten comments like, I would have ADHD too if you were my mom because of all this stuff. I'm like, this is over years, right? It was like we were trying thing after thing.
You must have felt so helpless in this situation.
Oh my goodness, so helpless. Because everything that I was told, was trained, was, told or trained by my teacher training or by, experts such as doctors, occupational therapists, and counselors. We did all of that and really saw no improvement. I mean, none. I mean, zero improvement in his symptoms. To the point where we got to the place where we even tried medication. Medication had helped my older son. I never wanted to do medication for him or my younger son. But in the US, when you get to high school, if you don't pass your classes, you don't get a high school diploma. And that's kind of where I was drawing the line, because I'm like, I don't care if you go to college, but like, you got to get a diploma. Like, for me, that was, my line. And so it helped my older son. And with my younger son, again, we went through another period of, because of his sensory things, he couldn't swallow a pill. And we went through this whole thing. We finally got him a powder that he could do. And he did that for a few months and hated it. So quickly took him right back off. He said he felt trapped in his own body. So like the medication was helping him to focus, but he knew it was that. And he felt like his body still wanted to move and he couldn't. He felt just, he didn't like it. So took him right back off after just a few months of that. And then, enter carnivore, right? So now I've been carnivore. He's been watching me do it. He's been for a year. He had a year to observe. And at this time he was 15. And at one point it was actually February. So about a year after I had started, February of, it was January when I brought it up to him, but I said, would you be willing to try carnivore for 30 days to just see what happens? And his only objection was that he would miss his dessert, which at that time was ice cream. And I was like, fair, because I didn't say this part, but fair. But in my brain, I'm like, because you're addicted to sugar, just like I was addicted to sugar. And I get it.
We all
wanting that stuff. And he would eat that. He was eating a very highly processed frozen food aisle, chicken nugget, mac and cheese, that kind of thing. What his diet was. Because a lot of it was based on what texture would he even tolerate. He ate very few foods because he tolerated very little in the way of the texture.
Sensory elements.
Sensory. So it was all based on what food will he even put in his mouth and not spit out and not throw up. So that's what he was eating. Well, he agreed to it if we could find him, some kind of dessert that would be tolerable. I tried the carnivore ice cream. He didn't like it. We finally settled on these like animal-based cookies they have like the beef isolate protein in there, and they're more keto than carnivore, but they are made with like beef protein, eggs, butter. So a lot of carnivore ingredients, and then some sugar-free chocolate chips and like cocoa powder, unsweetened cocoa powder. That's the basic gist of those ingredients. He still eats those from time to time, but it's crazy because he went from eating one of those every single day and sometimes he'll go through phases of that, but he hasn't had one. He told me like, I'm almost out of cookies because I'll make them and freeze them. But he had 2 left, and that was 3 weeks ago. Those 2 are still in the freezer, and he hasn't eaten any of the new batch. So he hasn't had any of those in like 3 weeks. So he'll go through these phases where and I never told him, you got to cut out sweet taste. I never told him that. It was just, okay. So I made him, we got to that place where he could have his little sweet thing at the end of the day, but it didn't have any sugar in it. And then the rest of his diet, his actual diet was, like carnivore substitution foods that I either found recipes for or made recipes for. Like I bought ground chicken and made my own chicken nuggets with just chicken, pork panko, which is like pork rind crumbs ground into a fine powder, some egg and some cheese. And I made chicken nuggets out of those. We started with a lot of that and carnivore pizza pockets, which is a slice of cheese, some pepperoni and sausage, another slice of cheese, bake it in the oven, and there you go. And he would eat that almost every day. That's how we started. After 30 days, I said, it was like day 30. And I'm like, well, it's been 30 days. You want to keep going? And he said, yeah. So he clearly noticed some differences.
And did you, sorry to interrupt, did you notice a difference in him in those 30 days?
Oh my gosh, yes. So This is not a thing that I care about, except for the fact that with ADHD, you have very little ability to look at a complex task, break it down into smaller tasks, and then overcome that and then get that task done. You literally can't do it. It feels like a big wall is in front of you and you don't even want to climb over that wall. So you just avoid it. You just don't even get started at all, because any complex task seems overwhelming. And so when he was a little kid, I was, the good mom or whatever that got to clean your room, because I grew up, got to clean my room, and you're going to clean your room. Well, I stopped fighting that battle when he was, I don't know, 8 years old, because the cleaning your room, it was like, I got enough battles to fight just getting this kid to school, trying to prevent a meltdown, trying to keep myself calm when he's calling me every name in the book, pitching a fit, throwing things. And I've got to stay calm through that, because if I don't, it gets worse. So I'm like, I'm not going to fight the let's clean your room battle, whatever. Keep the door closed, whatever. I stopped caring. And at this point, he was 15. So we're talking 7-8 years of he has literally not cleaned his room one time. Yeah. Because I didn't tell him to do it, and he's not going to do it on his own. And he was like borderline hoarder. Like there was stuff everywhere, stuff that I would consider trash, food wrappers, boxes for things he got for his birthday 3 years ago, and the box is still there. Stuff like that, just piled. Every corner, every crevice, every nook and cranny, closet full, under the bed full, a small pathway to walk through full. And probably, I don't even know, you'd have to go look back at the videos on my channel, because it's been a year now, but like a week or two in, during that first month, a week or two in, I'm sitting on the couch, and here he comes out of his room with a trash bag, and then another trash bag, and then another trash bag, until I said, hey, Zach, what you doing? And he just calmly said, cleaning my room, and then just continued like as if this was just a normal occurrence. And I was like, this is a flipping miracle. Wow. Because he ended up coming out of there with 13 or 14, I don't know, again, watch that video, trash bags. And he was stacking them up by the back door. And before this, I couldn't get him to throw anything away, by the way. Like when I would go in there when he was little and like try to help him clean his room, which we did a few times, and I was doing all the work, he would tell me, no, can't throw that away, can't throw that. And I'd have to sneaky throw it away, like when he wasn't looking, because he did not want to throw it away. And of his own free will, he's just throwing away, in the teens, bags of kitchen-sized giant bags, like not little bags, kitchen-sized bags. I don't know how many gallons those bags are, but big bags of trash. And then I just said, one time I said, please make sure that those bags get out to the outside trash can and don't just stay in the kitchen. And then eventually I went to bed, because at this stage in our lives, I go to bed earlier than he does. And so I went to bed. But the next morning I got up, and sure enough, if those bags were outside, I mean, I had to tell him one time. I don't know when in my life I've had to tell that boy one time to do anything. In fact, that was the source of the meltdown. Because I'd say, do this, and he would go, okay. And then he wouldn't do it. So I'd go remind him, and then he'd start to get angry. And then eventually like
oppositional defiance. Is that what they call it?
He has oppositional defiance, in my opinion. However, I didn't take him to get him diagnosed for that. I believe he has, though. And it does go very closely hand in hand with ADHD. So I forget the percentage, but it's a high percentage of kids with ADHD also have oppositional defiance. And I believe that he does have it, based on his behaviors. But no degree, again, no medical degree or anything like that.
Did have it if he doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah. So, it's not, so he's been doing this for a year. It's been 13 months and 1 week that he's been doing this. He used to have these meltdowns where he would just get so angry, and it was always over. Like I'm telling you, you would think that he was reacting to like some traumatic event. And it was like the event was take a shower. And he'd be throwing things and punching walls, and all the way up to the age of 15, like the typical like 2-year-old tantrum, but he was still having them through his whole life. He would have several a week, and he's had one in the entire 13 months, and he was having 3 or 4 a week before the diet change.
I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, do you spread the word at school? Because imagine how many parents are going through what you went through.
I do spread the word at school, and a lot of parents are going through what I went through, a lot. And I see it more and more. If it's not something like this, because as a general education teacher, I do part of my job is to sit in on meetings for those kids with those IEPs that are in my class and they have that IEP because of something like my son, or, another reason. If it's another reason, then many of them, like I just had a dad the other day say, my daughter, 10 years old, diagnosed with pre-diabetes. So I'm seeing both of these things happening at the same time. And I can't, there's not a lot I can say, but when I'm in those meetings, I say, I'm putting on my parent hat now. I'm not talking to you like a teacher. I'm talking to you as a parent. And here is what I noticed. But honestly, they are not ready to hear it for the most part. They're very like programmed into the I don't know, used to be the food pyramid. Now it's the my plate. They don't see carbs as the problem. They don't think diet can fix the problem. Similar to how I was when I said those parents are crazy, in my head to myself, those parents are crazy. It's just parenting. Like similar to that. They don't think that this can have such a profound effect. But I'm telling you right now, as a teacher who has been trained in a lot of this stuff, I didn't even tell you all the things. I told you a lot of things, but we tried everything for my son and nothing helped, and then changed his diet. And it was like a switch flipped for the positive. And if I would have, I've had somebody ask me just the other day, my child is 2.5. Would you recommend this for them? And my answer was, I'm not a health professional, but I'll tell you this. If I had known about this when my son was 2.5, I sure would have tried it for my own child at 2.5, because now he's developed some he's very anti-school. And I don't know if that's ever going to get fixed. So is he passing all of his classes? No, he's not, because he just does not want to complete those assignments. He's perfectly capable of doing it. He does not want to, but I don't have a problem getting him to school on time. That was a World War III type of battle every single day where one or both of us was crying. Now he just comes to the car like it's normal, right? He takes a shower and I don't have to tell him to take a shower. My other son, who's 19, has not changed his diet. I sometimes still have to tell him to take a shower or brush his teeth because I'll notice it's been several days.
Right.
Graduated high school. So that's how it used to be with my younger one. And now he just goes and like he's getting ready for school and he brushes his teeth and I don't have to tell him to. Or he got up already. He's up already for the day. He had his eggs, butter, and sausage, which is what he has for breakfast. He went and took a shower on his own. And then I went in there and said, I have an interview. Do you want eggs now or eggs later? He said, eggs now. So he took a shower and he's eaten breakfast. And before, I would have had to like struggle to get him to do those things. And he would have maybe had a meltdown if I like pushed it and like, made him do it. He would lose his mind over that.
I mean, it just feels like the tide is against us, to think of it on the broader societal level. I think about whenever I see a young kid with an iPad, I want to cry. Or yes. I was just watching YouTube the other day and just some video from some small channel came up that I just randomly clicked on. And it was a pregnant couple. So the woman was pregnant and it was them going to perfectly nice couple. I don't know why YouTube suggested it. I don't even know why I clicked on it. But I saw them going for McDonald's and she's pregnant. And I just thought, oh no.
I know. I know. It's like, I wish I could download everything from my brain that I've learned over the last 2 years and just be like, just look, because even to get them to look at it, just look at it. They don't want to look at it. They don't. Yeah. It's like, it just seems crazy to them to eat only meat. Because of the way that we've eaten now for so long as a society. And so I don't know how to change it, except that's why I have a YouTube channel and I can just keep it out there and talk about it as much as I can. And here and there, like another guy at work yesterday, I see him out at recess all the time. I'm not even sure I think he's one of the special education aides, because we have like autism classes, like for autistic kids that are too severely autistic to be in the general ed population. I think he's an aide in there, but he's always outside, playing basketball with the kids at recess and stuff. And just by pure chance, I happened to be wearing one of my Carnivore shirts that, said Carnivore says steak it easy. And so he asked me about it. I said, yeah, I'm a carnivore. I eat only meat. And he goes, me too. And I'm like, cool, come over to my channel, welcome, the more the merrier. But occasionally I'll meet one in real life. But most of the time when it's brought up outside of this, like with you and I here, people are like, okay, like you do you, but that's a little nuts. They don't say that, but by the look on their face and by their reaction and by their unwillingness to even think about it or try it, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they're thinking. Yeah.
You know, recently I've been getting mixed experiences. I live in Spain. It's Spain. I mean, the UK is pretty far gone towards junk food and processed food, I would say for sure. Spain, perhaps a little less so. Although, you know, the concept of carnivore is still a bit out there, you know, a bit extreme. But I often get people who are actually quite impressed when I say that I'm carnivore. They do often follow up with, but no vegetables, and that's the bit that they find it hard to wrap their heads around.
Yeah.
But just yesterday, I was at a lawyer's office, and the topic came up. And I said, yes, well, you know, actually I did have MS and, you know, now I'm carnivore. And she was completely down with it. And she actually knew about the keto diet. She didn't know about pure carnivore, but she knew about keto. And I'm finding, I mean, this could just be a cultural difference because Spain is less in the grip of veganism. You know, that's less of a trend here. It's starting to come here. In the UK, everybody's vegan or their junk food. Yeah, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but you know that veganism is a strong movement in the UK for sure. It's pretty mainstream now, and you can get vegan food everywhere. And there's a bit of a virtue signaling element to it. And also, you know, people concerned about the environment and all of that. So people who are genuinely concerned about animal welfare and the environment. But then there's also others who are virtue signaling, and there's a whole thing about it. But in Spain, it's less common. And I often find people, you know, kind of respect the carnivore diet. And that's quite interesting. But also a lot of autoimmune diseases and I guess diseases or conditions like ADHD are on the rise here. And it does feel like a matter of time before it's much the same levels. So I don't know. I do think that all we can do is talk about our experiences and keep putting out the word and showcasing our own health, you know, and our own vitality as carnivores and try not to get overwhelmed by it because it is overwhelming when you think about it. When you know, I never would have known that this was a thing that could have helped my MS. I would never have known. I just happened to click on a video on YouTube and my life changed. And same for you. And the lives we could be living now could be so radically different, so difficult. And it's quite mind-blowing really to think about it. Something so simple as diet can have such a radical change. What do you think of autism and the carnivore diet? I've not ever looked into it. I'm just, because you mentioned it, I just wonder, do you know of any research or case studies as regards autism?
So I don't know about case studies or research. I know a couple of people just through YouTube. It's amazing the community of like friends, and then if they're not friends, like YouTube acquaintances, I don't know, the YouTube group that you sort of get to know when you do what I've done, which is just create a channel from scratch and then just start interviewing people. You just start to meet these people, you get on their channels, you talk and chat, they invite you, and then before you know it, you've kind of built these relationships. I know of a couple of people in the YouTube carnivore space that are autistic, and they eat a carnivore diet and feel like it has improved their symptoms of autism. I have also heard, oh yes, and one of them she is autistic herself, and her two children are as well, and she feels like it's helped herself and her two children. I've also heard Dr. Anthony Chafee mention, I don't know if he's written it up as a case study or if it's just, you know, an experience with a patient or someone who met, you know, because these doctors that are carnivore doctors do go to the different events. I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard him share this. So this is, you know, hearsay through the grapevine, but a mom of an autistic child came up and said that basically when their child is eating a carnivore diet, they are verbal, they can speak. But then when that child goes to grandma and grandpa's and they are fed more of a standard Western diet, their ability to speak goes away. So they're technically diagnosed as a nonverbal autistic person, but when they eat fatty meat, they're able to actually speak, which I find fascinating and amazing. And I wish I could go into all those classes with all of those autistic children. Like even one of my students now, she has twin brothers and they're both autistic and they're both in that class and they don't speak. And I want to go, I wish that I could, you know, it's beyond the scope of what I'm supposed to be doing in my profession. But I wish that there was a way to go in there and just be like, look, try eating some meat for a few weeks and watch the magic pill documentary, and then see if that changes your mind, because it is about a little girl and how they do change her diet and how amazing her transformation is.
You're already doing an amazing job, outside of your work environment, and I'm sure, just through talking to people in passing in the school environment, you are spreading the word and you are demonstrating, and that is all any person can be expected to do. And what's wonderful is, as you were saying, networking with other carnivores and the synergies across the world. You're in California, I'm in Spain, and we're having this discussion and we're sharing our experiences, and that's being watched by people out there, and those people are sharing it all. And there is a movement for health, for human health. And that's that may be a drop in the ocean at this time, but because of the truth of it and the reality of it, there's got to be power in that. It's and we were talking at the beginning of the discussion about the way humans ate back, in hunter-gatherer times, and you were talking about this is as deep as it goes. It's the depths of being human, and so there's got to be some power in that, I believe. And I've loved hearing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And my hope is that people watching, whether they're carnivore or not, will be able to relate or know people who are in a similar situation, which must be so, so difficult, to think that there could be some hope for those types of situations, because that, as you say, they're becoming more and more common. ADHD is an absolute, it's becoming endemic, isn't it?
Yeah.
For many different reasons. And it's and the same with autoimmune diseases. They're completely on the rise, and we could talk about the causes of that. I think there are various different causes of that, as you've said, and some we haven't mentioned, but I don't know what you believe, but they can become quite controversial, these opinions, but we don't need to go into the causes when there's a solution.
Absolutely. Yes. So would you like me to tell you, because you mentioned my work, and I have a little funny story that just happened yesterday in regards to that. So I can't stand up in front of my classroom and teach the carnivore way of eating like it's a curriculum, right? Because it's not. And fortunately, I don't have to teach any kind of dietary pattern. It's not part of our curriculum at all. So I don't have to stand up there and, preach the eat your whole grain thing, which good, because I wouldn't. But at any rate, I do talk about it. So when, when it's right after school and heading out the gate or heading out to recess, I mention these things, and my students know that I have a YouTube channel, and they know that it's called Meeting Wellness, and that I only eat meat, because every holiday they ask me, some of them still ask me, well, what kind of chocolate do you want for this or Valentine's Day or whatever? And I'm like, but I only eat meat though. But what kind of chocolate though? I'm like, no, I don't eat, and so eventually it does sink in, right? And so this is the year I turned 50. I will be 50 in October. And our principal of our school is the same age. I mean, we were both born in the same year. She just had her 50th birthday yesterday. And so the students, we all, we bought her some flowers, and they all made this poster for her happy birthday and all this stuff. And so one of my students was like, so are you 50 yet, or are you going to turn 50? I'm like, oh, I'm going to turn 50, in October. So I'm just a few months, behind the principal. And he said, yeah, but you still look so young because you eat a lot of protein and fat.
No way.
Yes.
Amazing.
Right? So all the little things, I'd never taught them a lesson. It's just little things here and there, little sentences, little conversations.
Kids don't want to be told stuff. That's having to do schoolwork, isn't it? And if they're observing themselves, and if they've got their curiosity sparked, and you're not promoting it, but you're just quietly, that's weird. I only eat meat.
Right.
Be more effective. They're probably more open to it than if you're standing there telling them what they must do.
Oh, correct. So I just thought, that I was cracking up. I laughed so hard, and then I said, "You got that 100% right, bud."
Amazing. Yes. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know, it's so nice to talk to you. It's so great to talk to you. And I would love to continue the conversation. I have so many other things I wanted to bring up.
I am 100% happy to come back for a part 2. You're one of my favorite people to chat to. So just shoot me an email. Let me know when you're ready. I'm ready anytime you are. And now we know a time that works for both of us on a Saturday. So yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. Sure. No, I definitely will. So many topics. It's about the human body and the human mind. You know, really, there's no end of dimensions to this, but it's super cool to talk to you. And as I say, everybody, if you're watching, subscribe to Cristie's channel. She's got a fantastic YouTube channel packed full of information, interviews, and she's just a wonderful representative of the carnivore community, as you have seen in this interview. So thank you again. Thank you, and speak to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca.